Here we go. Okay, so today we talk about very quickly FTP, power training zones, normalized power and average power. That's the lead into most of it. The three important points that the step beyond FTP, the first port of call to look at your power data, what to look for, and how to derive those metrics will be efficiency factor, variability index, and intensity factor. Okay. So first we go to what is FTP. All right. So FTP, a lot of people know that, they'll think that, oh, it's a figure and I do a test on Zwift or on Trainer Road, and it's a 20-minute power, okay? But actually the true definition of FTP is the highest power that a rider can maintain in a steady state for 1 hour. So a lot of the times, even with the FTP test protocol taking 95% of your 20-minute power, I find that that's not accurate. Like it's actually higher than a fair bit higher than what we can truly ride for an hour. Okay, so I like to use 91% of the 20-minute time trial power. Okay, and that is if the test is conducted correctly. Okay, so this is the test protocol here. 20 minutes endurance pace, just warm up, just spin. 3 times 1 minute fast pedaling to wake the legs up. 5 minutes easy to reset, okay, regroup, and just to get your head around what you're about to do. Now this portion is this here, 5 minutes all out. This is an important part of the FTP test that if you do it on the Zwift or the Trainer Road and you don't understand why, then you might think it's a deeper part of the warm-up, and you might actually hold back a little bit so that your 20-minute time trial power can be higher, right? And then, the downstream effect is that your FTP will be higher, and then your friends think you're very fast, okay? The truth is that this 5-minute all-out power really needs to be done all out, like as hard as you can. And I'll go into why, all right, in the next couple of slides. Okay, so following this test protocol, your FTP is 91 to 93% of average time trial power. So that's how I calculate it. And ideally, you should have a specific FTP for your road bike and your tri bike, because you're in different positions, all right, and even if you're on the trainer as well. So the most important thing about going into power and analyzing data and all that is that you either do it properly and accurately, or there's really not much point getting into it. Okay, so and I find that it's better to slightly underestimate your FTP power, okay, than to overestimate it, because of downstream implications of riding at a higher than your actual power zones as we zone them. Okay, especially now that we are training polarized, I think that it's safer to ride slightly at a lower power than overestimate your FTP and be in the wrong zone. Okay. Okay, so for 90% of the people with a power meter, this is where it ends, right? Like, what is your FTP? The higher the number, the better. Okay, and then some people will go on to ask about watts per kilo, and you know, that's your FTP divided by your weight in kilograms. And then they'll think, okay, that's the level playing ground. So my FTP watts per kilo is higher than yours. So I'm better cyclist than you, I'm faster than you. Okay, so that today we want to just go a little bit deeper into that and kind of debunk those myths. All right. So first up, the FTP Test Protocol. Why the 5-minute all out? All right. Won't this affect my 20-minute time trial? Yes, it will. Okay, your power will be lower in the 20-minute time trial, but the reasons we do that is to burn off some of the anaerobic capacity in the legs. So to burn off some of that sheer brute force muscular power, because in the end, the FTP test is a test for your aerobic capacity, right? How hard you can push yourself for an extended period, all right? The test is 20 minutes, and then you extrapolate for an hour. I mean, the truest FTP test, all right, is an hour time trial. But if I said that, like, no one's gonna do an FTP test, like I wouldn't even do it, okay, because it would be so painful. I mean, another way you can do it is to track your power in a race condition and all that. But you know, for coaching purposes, we extrapolate 91% of your 20-minute power. Okay. The second reason that the 5-minute all-out figure, that power figure, is important. Okay, and it doesn't tell that to you when you do it in Zwift or Trainer Road, which is why when I get you to do it, like I get you to lap it on your own power recording device, so that I have that power for the 5 minutes all out. Okay, because this is actually a test in itself. Okay, it's called the anaerobic capacity VO2 max test. So there's the anaerobic, the VO2 max test, and the FTP test, and they can be done together. Okay, or you can do them separately, but you can do them together. So this is an anaerobic capacity test. And why is that useful to me as a coach? Is because you see at the 5-minute power, you can 85% of your VO2 test power, your 5-minute power, is your theoretical FTP potential. So this has been, you know, come through a lot of data from the guys that invented training with power and FTP and all that. And so 85% of that power is your potential highest FTP. Okay, so when you compare that to your actual FTP test, what the FTP figure is, right? Then you can tell which system is more or less developed. Okay, so I'll give you an example. Okay, so if 85% of your 5-minute power is much greater than your FTP, right? Then that tells me that aerobically you are underdeveloped. So you can push for 5 minutes aerobically, but you can't push for 20 minutes. Okay, you're unable to hold a longer effort. And then so that says maybe the first port of call for your bike training would be to spend time developing this system, right, with longer duration, slightly lower intensity, kind of sweet spot work. All right, and maybe even some of that really low intensity easy rides. Okay. Whereas if your 85% of your 5-minute power is approximately equal to your FTP, then aerobically you're okay. Like we know that you can push at a meaningful level for 20 minutes. Okay, then we got to think about how you can get stronger on the bike. So bike fitness, right? Like I see it quite simply as like strength and like cardiovascular tolerance or ability to hold that heart rate. So to get strong on the bike is a matter of like, you know, bumping up the strength and then bumping up the cardio and then bumping up the cardio and then the strength. So they both increase, you know, step by step. So if you're, I say it again, so if your 85% of your 5-minute power is approximately equal to your FTP, then you know that, okay, aerobically, you're okay. You can hold that 20-minute time trial, and in theory, your 1-hour time power at a satisfactory level. And then we need to think about, well, how are we going to get the strength up then? So then we go back to, you know, like strength work in the gym, or doing big gear repeats, or just maybe a phase of strength work on the bike. All right, and then we put a secondary priority to developing the cardiovascular, because we know what's holding you back is the strength in your legs and not your cardio. Okay, so actually it adds another layer to the FTP test when you do the 5-minute all out properly. Okay. Okay. So both of you get that, right? Quite easy to understand. Okay.
Yeah, I got it.
Quickly, these are the zones. These are the standard Coggin power zones. Coggin was the guy who came up with him and this guy called Hunter Allen. And so basically zone 1 easiest, zone 7 or zone 6 the hardest. All right. And the zones are similar to, like previously people will be talking about heart rate zones. So this is just how to grade the intensity level. All right. So active recovery is below 55%, aerobic endurance 56 to 75, so on and so forth. Okay. It's all here. It's in lots of charts. I don't really have to go into this. The different zones are used at different times of your training cycle. Okay, so it helps you to identify which system you're targeting during a particular session. All right, so if you have, say, like, you know, 3 times 12 minutes at 80% of your FTP, then we know that that day I want you to work your tempo, or I want you to work tempo. Okay. These are okay. So these are the qualities of that zone, how it should feel when you're doing it. So Greg, you've been writing together a couple of weeks, like that zone 2 work we've been doing. Okay. Zone 2 heart rate, I'll just make it clear, is aerobic endurance. Okay. So it's long, slow distance, and it's conversational, which is, you know, for us, it's been pretty easy. All right. And then today, what we did would have been, you know, like your FTPs would be like, it'd be in a hard tempo session. All right. So half Ironman race pace, intervals of 20 to 60 minutes. So today we did like 3 to 4 laps of Salita, and each lap was about 20 minutes. So that's essentially what we did today. We did an interval set on the road today. All right, 4 times 20 minutes. Okay. So on and so forth. So these higher zones here, 5 and 6, are not as specific and to long course racing. Okay, VO2 max intervals, I still like to use them because it kind of raises the ceiling, like it just pushes up your aerobic capacity when you do that. But there's a certain time to use VO2 max intervals, and so you got to be careful with those. All right, either at the right at the start, and I'll go into this in the next couple of slides, like either early in the season to just open everything up if you've been on an off season for a while, or minimally, like sparingly put in just before a race. Okay, just again to open everything up. Right. So these are like surges, short climbs, attacks in the Olympic distance. All right. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So next slide. This is just for a bit of knowledge. Another reason why we train at different zones is because the physiological adaptations is quite different at these different intensities. Now, it's important to know that it's not like a very graded. It's not as if like if you go at 80%, you're working You know, it's not like if you're in level 4, you work threshold, lactate threshold, and then you cross over to, you know, like 105%, and then straight away your body switches. So it's a spectrum, okay? But it's a general like shift from, okay, so active recovery, right? It's about efficiency because normally you're spinning, getting the metabolic waste through the liver, okay? Level 2, power zone 2, endurance, okay? Increase muscle glycogen storage. So you train your body to be able to store more glycogen during the ride, right? As well as during a refueling. And then this is interesting, important, increase muscle mitochondrial enzymes. So this has to do with the energy systems, all right? And about just the efficiency, fuel efficiency, metabolizing fat, and so on and so forth. So that happens at really like low power and low intensity, low heart rate stuff, which is why we cap it at the lactate threshold 1, okay, LT1, which is the other webinar on polarized training, okay, but both of you will know this by now. Level 3 is like tempo. So you see there's a bit of overlap here with the glycogen storage, but actually important to note here is the conversion of type 2X to type 2A fibers, all right? So this is the next slide when I'll give you a little bit of info about different types of muscle fiber and why this is, as endurance athletes, like this is an important something that we want to go for, okay? Important goal in our training is this conversion of fibers, all right? Increased plasma volume, that's just like more blood, see enzymes and stuff. This, all right, this starts to fade away, then you get, as you work through the levels, you have different stimulus and different adaptations, okay? Increase VO2 max, obviously when you do a VO2 max intervals, and that just means that you're able to consume and process more oxygen at your maximum effort, okay? Increase stroke volume, obviously like your heart's just pumping, jumping out of his chest, so it gets used to that, it adapts to that, okay? Okay, let's see, I'm blocking this, all right. So really quickly, different types of muscle fiber. Okay, so in our muscle, there are 2 types of fiber, all right? Type 1 slow twitch fibers, which are not as powerful as the fast twitch type 2 fibers, okay? They contract slower, but they last longer. So if you think about like a boa constrictor, and it slowly squeezes its prey, those are type 2 fibers, right? Slow contractions, and they last longer. So they, as endurance athletes, that's kind of what we want, okay? The proportion of type 1 to type 2 is genetic, all right? So there are some people that are a little bit more skewed towards sprinting or high power efforts, all right? And other athletes that are more geared towards endurance, which is why, like, if you look at cyclists, some of them are sprinters and some of them are, like 3-week long, tour riders, okay? The thing is, there are 2 types of type 2. So 2 types of fast twitch fibers, all right? Type 2A show some of the characteristics of type 1 fibers, all right? Which are the slow twitch, which is what we want, all right? And type 2X are purely explosive power, okay? So the interesting thing is that at lower intensities, all right, the 2A fibers can be converted to type 1 slow twitch fibers, all right? Or the characteristics start to resemble how slow twitch fibers perform, all right? And so that's part of the training stimulus that we are after, and part of why it's important to keep the low intensity stuff proper low, because as we saw in the previous slide, like it happens mostly in the power zone 2 and 3, okay, which coincides with like below heart rate zone 3. So heart rate zone 2 up to 2.5, 2.8. That stuff kind of happens. The majority of that stuff happens there, that low heart rate. Okay, so now you know why we work there. All right. Why different power zones to guide your effort levels? Sorry?
Can you hear me?
I can't really hear you, Greg. Can you like speak closer to the mic?
Sorry. Can you now? Is it better?
Marginally.
Yeah. Can you hear me now? Is it better?
It's still cracking up, but you can try.
No. Okay.
Yeah. Hello.
Yeah. So the zone 2 is to convert these type 2 muscles. Can you hear me?
Yep.
The outside. The zone. The outside.
Sorry, I can't hear you. You're breaking up.
Yeah. No, my question was: is zone 2 to convert the type 2 muscles? Is that what we're doing with those zone 2 runs? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like generally training at a low heart rate converts the 2A fibers to take on the characteristics of type 1 slow twitch fibers. So that's one of the reasons we do it, aside from the the consistency with training and all that kind of stuff, which I'm about to get to. Okay. Okay, I can't really hear you, Greg, but I'm just going to carry on, okay? Why different power zones?
Yes.
To guide your effort levels, either to hold you back or to motivate you to push harder. Next slide, we're going to go into a bit of this. Increase awareness for the purpose of that workout. So if in a certain phase of your training, you know which sessions you're doing and why you're doing it. We can talk about periodization here. Different phases of your training will require different stimulus. Now it's a little bit different because we're in the COVID lockdown and there's not much racing. So a lot of us are just doing maintenance work, all right? But if we're in a proper phase season where you have an A race that you know absolutely that's where you want to do your best on, then we'll go through a phase season, and different phases of that season will require different types of training stimulus. All right. So basically, your power zones allow you to zone your efforts more accurately for better quality sessions and to track your progress during the different phases of training. Right. So we'll go into that as well. If you're training with both heart rate and power, and I think that if we already are onto power, then it's important to include heart rate in that, okay? Then I would prefer to use heart rate to hold back. So for the heart rate to keep you easy on the low intensity stuff, and the power goes to motivate you to push harder, okay? So when we talk about the periodization, yeah, just real quick, like pre-season, generally easy unstructured miles to get back into the saddle, get your body used to training consistently again. All right. In the build period here, we go into a polarized model where it's 80% low intensity and 20% high intensity intervals. All right, and we'll define those in a bit. And these are both heart rate and power guided, all right? And I find that it's actually really important to stick to your zones. And this is a new thing for me because previously I was always a coach with perceived effort. But since trying this out and getting you guys to switch over to polarized training, like I've had a lot of success. So you guys are really responding to it well. So I'm a big believer in that now, okay? And then before the race, like some people call this build 2, but specialization is when we go kind of race specific. That's when we kind of skew the polarized training to more pyramidal model. Okay, with more, you'll be spending slightly more time in zone 3, like in the threshold work, which in the build period we wouldn't have spent time there, okay? Because this is more race specific, depending on the distance of the race you're doing, a 70.3 or 4 Ironman. We want to get really efficient at the effort levels that you'll be experiencing on race day itself. Okay, so we mimic the race day demands, right, of distance and cost profile. Okay, peak is, if you know, yeah, so the peak comes maybe like 2 weeks, 3 weeks out. And that's when I'd like to put in like just once a week some really high intensity, like VO2 max intervals. This is the peak is you know, peaking that phase. It's sometimes I put it, sometimes I don't put it in. If you've been going for a long time and you're well trained, then I would put a peak in. Just it's like a cherry on top of a cake. Okay, but otherwise we can normally, you can go from race specific straight to taper. The purpose of the peak, and what happens in the peak, is that you actually further differentiate between high and low intensity. So if you think about in the polarized phase build, right, it's 80-20, like 80% easy, 20% of the sessions hard, right? During the peak, and it's only for maybe like 10 days to 2 weeks, we would push the hard efforts even harder, right? So we zone 5 heart rate, and the easy sessions would be even easier. So really wouldn't even get you, you know, beyond zone 2 heart rate, as opposed to going up at 2.5, 2.8 heart rate. Okay, so it's even more distinct. All right. That's to let your body rest with the long easy stuff, but to keep the systems open and very open. Okay, so you're freshening up while keeping, you know, all the systems kind of switched on, right? And then in the taper, we have different ways of tapering, but generally that's a decrease in the training load while keeping the training frequency up there. Okay. Polarized. Okay, so this slide you would have seen from the past webinar, and I think we are all quite familiar with this. Okay, so getting the zones right. This is heart rate stuff, and I did this in the first run of this talk because some of them weren't familiar with it. Okay, but we all very know this, so I'm going to skip this. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so on to the power stuff. Normalized power versus average power. Okay, what is the difference? Okay, so first thing, you know, power output is very sensitive to gradient, wind, surges. Okay, it makes it very variable in nature. So the definition of normalized power is an expression of average power. So it's a form of average power that is adjusted for the variability during the ride. Okay, basically, normalized power more closely reflects the metabolic cost of that ride, right? Normalized power compares the range of variability of ride to the average power of that ride. Normalized power. Okay, so what you need to know is normalized power is what we use when we compare data from rides, and it describes what a ride feels like better describes what it feels like compared to average power. So normalized power can be thought of as the true power that should be used on almost all the time to describe a ride. So here are some examples. All right. Okay. So this is some of the sessions that we've been doing on Trainer Road and Zwift. You might recognize them. This is the climb and sprint set. So you see the average power for this set is 178 watts. And when you do that, you think, oh, that's not really, like if your FTP is 240, 250, whatever, you think, oh, that's not really that hard, right? But when you do it, it feels hard because these are all, you know, these are all like big gear repeats, and these are quite, you know, ferocious sprints. The normalized power comes up at 205, which is higher than the average power. So it does reflect that this ride feels harder than 178 watts, okay? Same for this VO2 max, because you see the average power takes into account, well, it it's basically average. It's an average of the highs here as well as the lows here, your rest intervals. That's why it's a measly 170 watt average. Right? Normalized, it comes out at 217. Okay, so it's just stuff like that. It's good to know when you're looking at data. Look at normalized power, all right, over average power. Okay, right. See my notes. Best use of the.
So Shem, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Can you hear me? I had to jump out. Yeah. So I guess this sort of relates to what we talked about. The problem with if you don't lap your thing, you won't be able to see the normalized power for your interval, and then it becomes irrelevant in terms of the information.
Well, in terms of information, yes. Like the most relevant thing is that you did the set, and that's 90% of it. Okay.
Yeah, if it's a general set, it's okay. You can see it, right? I guess. But if you're on the road, you probably won't be able to see what the effort was for training in that sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And like really, an important thing is that the power data, right, is to be collected on the ride, executing your structured set as I've put down, as your coach has put down, right? And then you go back after the ride. You have a shower, you have some food, have a coffee, then you sit down and open up, then you geek out to the data there. Right? It's not so relevant to triathlon training to look at what's going on in real time, because I mean that obviously that's dangerous. But like the real use of having a power meter and collecting data is actually analyzing it. There's no point you just plug it in and you see your power on riding at 300 watts today and feeling good. I mean, that's a silly use of a power meter. Okay. The real value is what you do with the data, how to analyze it. So what you're saying about lapping it is correct for like if you want to do. Yeah, we're going into this later. Okay, next couple of slides.
Okay. Sorry, I jumped in.
No, that's fine. That's fine. In fact, right here, okay, efficiency factor. Okay. Hang on. Okay, so the next slide is here. But I want to read the notes that are from. Okay. Efficiency factor, okay, is the first one of the 3 points that we were talking about today. It's how to calculate it, okay, is your normalized power of that ride, right, as a ratio of your average heart rate, okay, which is why heart rate and power work hand in hand. It's not one or the other, right? Comparing power output, which is your normalized power, to the input, right, which is how hard you're working, right? So as you get fitter, you would expect for the same input, your output should increase, right? So for the same average heart rate that you ride, right, your normalized power should slowly start to creep up if you are indeed getting fitter and if you are indeed training right? So calculating your ride efficiency factor allows you to do this, okay? So for example, these zone 2 rides that we're doing, I wouldn't pay attention to the power while you ride, just gather the data and then you compare your efficiency factor on similar rides, right? Over several weeks, okay? Similar rides meaning the route is the same, your level of fatigue is the same, meaning you're consistent in your training and you train like 5 hours a week or 6 hours a week, right? Conditions are the same and the nutrition during a ride is the same, okay? Which is why when we ride, Greg, like we always have set pieces like today we're doing this route or today we're doing that route, right? Because when I go back and I look at the data, like I know which route we do, then I know which weeks we can compare. I'm not saying you can't compare different routes and rides, but it just makes for better comparison because you're just eliminating variables, right? Okay. Let me go back to my notes on the previous slide. Yeah, no, this is fine. I won't go into any more on that. Okay, so Efficiency factor, useful to track this during all phases of training. Okay, good practice to use the same route. Yep, talked about that. Track each phase separately and then compare the different phases. So you can track your rides during the preseason, during the build, during the race specific season. Then you can compare how efficient you are, like between the different phases as well. Okay. So coming out of off season when fitness is low, when you are training to go long before you go fast. Okay. So this is the next slide. Here. Okay. So this is a table of my rides end of last year, okay, to just before kind of COVID hit, all right? Hang on, I want to move this. Okay, so if you look at the efficiency factor here, and again, efficiency factor is normalized power over heart rate. So this figure over this figure here, all right?
Garmin doesn't provide that number, right, Shem? This one is manually keyed in by you.
Yep.
Okay.
So you see it's gradually getting higher, right? Over the weeks and months. I have nutritional notes here, okay? Yeah, we're talking about these two later. And the loop is the route that we're doing is pretty much the same. West loop, Seletar, West loop, okay?
It's all same routes.
Yeah, okay, so the variables are controlled. So, you know, you guys can build these sort of tables for yourself and just plunk in the data, all right? Now, hang on, my notes are coming on a different page. Okay. And then the next slide, we are going to talk about low intensity training data, right? So this is just an example again of the last couple of months from that ride in 1st of February all through to August now, okay? There's some gaps and stuff, but what I wanted to show is like in August, okay, I've been really focused on keeping the heart rate low. Okay, and what we can see here again is that increase in the efficiency factor, all right, from 1.34 to 3.1, then 1.39. Okay, what jumped out at me is like this is the same route that I did in April, okay, and the efficiency factor is 1.268, whatever. So it was a low intensity ride, meaning the average heart rate was, you know, kept low, below zone 2, all right? And next slide shows the data from the Garmin. Okay, so for the same ride in August, right? Even though, which is here, even though I spent more time under LT1 heart rate, okay, more time at low intensity, I was able to ride for 20% longer at a power above zone 3 power. Okay, so we look at this ride and this ride. The total time spent under LT1 was 89%. Here it was only 81%. Okay, so I actually spent more time up here in zone 3. So this was a more well-controlled ride. Okay, however, if we look at the power distribution, the time spent in zone 3 and above was 33%. And in this ride, the time spent in zone 3 and above is only 13%. Okay, so there's the proof. This is why it's important to, you know, like to compare different rides and different phases of your training, right? So obviously, this capping, this LIT training, polarized is working. Okay, and the cherry, I guess, on top of the cake was that this ride done a couple of weeks ago the FTP was at 240, and my FTP in the fourth variable was 223. So that lends, that makes it even more significant that I'm riding above zone 3 power for 20% more time. Okay. All right. So that's efficiency factor, right? Normalized power over your average heart rate. Okay. And again, you track it from a similar ride early in the year to if you put in a dedicated block of training and you think, all right, I feel fitter now, then you test it again and then you see how you go. Or you can do a weekly progression like I did, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next one is variability index. Okay, so the variability index is the ratio of normalized power to average power for a ride. So it's a measure of the evenness of the ride or how well you pace it. So you can see here, and this might be the only use of average power that is useful, is to calculate VI, all right? So it's your normalized power over your average power. If you rode it in a perfect world and perfectly paced with no accelerations, no hills, no wind, your normalized power would be the same as your average power, okay? But it's never the case, all right? So tracking variability index on your long training rides week to week will help develop your intuitive sense of pacing, okay? It helps you track, it helps if your long ride routes are roughly the same or you have a few set pieces that you use. This is so you can go back and compare the data, okay? Okay, so VI is useful when training for a race rather than the actual racing situation, okay? Where when you're in a race, you would have you should be able to go by feel, like mentally, you kind of know how you should be feeling at 40 Ks, at 50 Ks, at 80 Ks, and at 90 Ks, all right? But VI helps you to, in your training, to understand and compare ride to ride how you are pacing it, right? So as a triathlete, we want to minimize VI, riding your long, steady training rides as evenly as possible, okay? Meaning when like if you're on a climb, you don't hammer it up a climb, you switch to a smaller gear and you spin up, all right? A high VI in a ride tells you that you wasted energy on surges or rode the climbs too hard. Or if you're in a block headwind, then you would kind of ride easier, okay, knowing that you're in a headwind, and you just keep one eye on the power numbers, all right, instead of trying to maintain your speed, okay. Therefore, VI is a useful training metric, but less useful in actual race day situation, okay. Okay, so intensity factor is the third one we're talking about. Intensity factor is basically how hard you rode that ride. The ratio of normalized power, okay, over your current FTP, right? So it gives you, basically how hard that ride was. So it quantifies your effort relative to your current fitness. If you're using data from the same route executed on 2 different occasions, the rider can then compare the fitness at these 2 times. So if you put out a ride in the pre-season or early season, all right, and then you put the same ride in during like a race-specific season, you should be able to see that you're able to ride it at a higher intensity factor, okay? So the fitter you are, the higher your IFB can be for a given race, okay? So race-specific workouts are important for gathering this kind of data because it gives you a target IF that you can ride at during a race, right? So it quantifies your improvement as well. So for example, if we rode 90 Ks, right, and my FTP is say 240, okay? If my normalized power for that at the start of the season for this ride was 170, right? But then before the race, I could do it at 190. Then, you know, my intensity factor would be better, and I would know that I can ride it closer to like 0.8 intensity factor. Okay, so that's the metric that we can use going into the race to give us a goal to hit and motivate us to push during a race to push hard on the bike. Or if in training that we've tested it and we know the IF for 90Ks on the bike, right? Okay, so this is a slide that we spoke about earlier. Now, if we look at calculating the intensity factor for this ride, we can see that in April, I was able to ride this at 0.68 IF, right? And in August, I was riding it at 0.64 IF. So this is not because I was riding, well, it just shows that I was riding it easier. So for the same ride at like higher power, lower heart rate, right, it felt easier for me, all right? So again, that's just showing the training progression, right? So intensity factor at the races, this is a rough guide. We are concerned about, I guess, half Ironman races here. So if you're an intermediate level athlete, then, you know, your goal IF would be 0.7 to 0.79 of your FTP. So 70% to 79% of your FTP, all right? The fitter you are, the harder you can push it. And then you're looking at maybe riding the 90Ks at 80% to 85% of your FTP, okay? So this, again, this is, as you enter the race specific phase, you would have this goal, all right? Maybe you start at 0.7, and then the next week you repeat that ride, and then you see if you can go above 70%, 75%. And then 1 week you might overdo it. Say, okay, this week I'm feeling really good. I think I can try for like an 80, you know, 0.82 IF, right? And then you bonk and you fail your last lap, your last section of the ride, you're crawling home. Then you know that, okay, you're not there yet. So then we back it up. So then we know we go back and say, okay, I think, Greg, for your race, like we try for, you know, an IF of 0.75, and that'll be safe, right? And then if you're good on day, you push again, right? But yeah, so for an Ironman, it's lower, 0.6 to 0.7 IF, right? Or 0.7 to 0.79 IF if you're a fit age grouper, okay?
Yep.
Okay. So building a power plan in training, how does this go? This is what well, I tried to give you an idea of how to do this today, Greg. So examine the course that you're going to do, all right? The terrain and the number of laps. You replicate it on the roads as much as possible. So, you know, if it's a really flat course, then you might go to coastal and do your loops. If it's rolling, you might do somewhere like Mandai loops, or you go out you throw in some hills somewhere. Even the Seletar Aerospace Park, it's not quite hilly enough. That I'd still consider that flat, all right? But you replicate it as
that's right.
Yeah, and then you break it into manageable portions, and then you track your NP each lap, all right, to get an idea of your pacing, all right? So, for example, today we did 4 laps, right? So week 1 we did 4 laps, and for my powers, like first lap was 2:12, then I went down to 2:11 and 2:05, and then 1:95. So I really suffered and wasn't able to put out that power on that last lap that we did today. Okay, so then next week, if we're training for your, you know, your A race in 6 weeks time, then next week we'll go out and do the same ride, but knowing that maybe I should try and ride that in reverse and start with maybe a conservative like 190 power, all right, and then we bump it up to 195 or 200, and you know, and then we can see if we can get a bit cheeky, 205 and 210, right? And so that way you always end up finishing strong, which is much more positive than if you're crawling and really suffering at the end of your race, all right? So then you would adjust it week to week. and then maybe by the third week we would add in lap 5 or lap 6, okay, and then we see, you know, how you go. And during this time, you would also track your efficiency factor and see if that was improving, and see if you were able to ride your intensity factor, like at a harder and harder effort level each week until you got to the race, right? So it just gives you a metric to show you, IF gives you a metric to show you how hard you rode that race, that
So
ride.
the idea is for your body to recognize where that line is for you to be pushing to hit that pace that you need to. Correct? Is that the whole idea from each of the laps? It's just you want to sustain and try to identify where that line is?
Well, for each of the laps, but we are actually really looking at the entire ride, you see. You know what I mean? Like the lap, like lapping it at each, getting the data for each lap would tell you how you pace the ride throughout, right? But in the end, if we're doing this for 6 weeks, building up to your 70.3 race, right, we would also be looking at your IF as you get into the race, right? And we would be, you know, each week we were trying to push the IF, until maybe 1 week it blows up, you blew up, and then your IF went down. Okay, then we go look at whether it's extra fatigue or you're overtrained, or we have found that, you know, you are able to ride at, you know, like 0.75 IF, and you're not able to ride at 0.82 IF.
Okay.
And so going into the race, like, you know that where your fitness is at. You get it?
Yeah, I get it. It's a little bit like a trial and error. Try to match some of the variables and understand yourself as you go into the race.
So you don't go into the race blind and sell yourself short. You know, for example, and then you're riding at, like, you know, an IF of 0.6, and you think, oh, this is good enough for today. When you know in your training that you have been able to ride this ride at 0.7 or 0.75 IF, right?
Right. So you know how hard to push also in the race, so you don't sell yourself short. Yeah, I get it. Got it.
So you're basically looking for patterns in lab data through the progression of weeks, right? And what nutrition. So if you load in your nutrition notes as well, then it gives you an idea what the effect of, you know, like 300 calories on a ride has over 400 calories, over 500 calories. And if you hit like 600, then maybe you have a tummy upset. So then you know when to back off, right? Because all this is very individual, and you can't do testing to find out how much is the right amount for you, that sweet spot for you.
Okay, got it.
Yep. Cool. Okay. So
back to what you say, repetition again and repeatability for you to move out all these variables. Yeah.
Which is why, you know, like when we do the trainer sets and stuff on Zwift, I tend to keep it going the same. We work on the same sets for at least 6 weeks, you know, like at least 4 weeks. And then some people say they get bored a bit and all that, but actually, you know, if I had my way, I would
6
go
weeks.
6 weeks, even 8 weeks to make sure that we've adapted, we've learned how to ride those intervals, and then we can progress from there, you see. Okay. So this is a little slide on pacing on climbs and descents. It's a rule of thumb kind of a thing, because when you are climbing, like, your power shoots up, so then you think, oh, how much above FTP can I push, or how much above goal race power should I push so that I don't blow up, right? So, for example, for a 30 km/h race split, okay, let's say about 30 km an hour, then you ride steady at your goal race power, right? If you are descending, okay, on a gradual incline, your speed picks up to about 40 km an hour, then you should drop below goal power, right? If you're descending steep and going fast, then you stop pedaling and get aero. Okay, this is because well, like power and aerodynamics is like a cubic factor. So when you're going fast, you're pushing against a lot of wind, right? You have to generate a lot more power to go really like a little bit quicker only. So really no point, okay? No point. Whereas if you're climbing, all right, and you got a gentle climb, and you're going about 20 km an hour, then you can push a bit. And my sources doesn't say how much is a bit, but I'm thinking like 20% above your goal power.
Yeah.
Because again, it's to feel like like if it's a long climb, then you know that it should be like a little bit above goal power. Because it's a short climb, you want to get over it quickly, then then you can, and that's when you're when you're climbing steep and you're going at 10-15 km an hour, but it's a short steep climb, right? And push well above goal power, right? And then you get over quicker, and then you can continue along the way, right? So this is just rough.
Yes.
For 30k an hour race split. So if your goal race pace is quicker, then you would adjust that accordingly. So if it's like 36 km an hour, then you would adjust all the rest accordingly. Okay. Okay, so that kind of wraps it up. Sorry, today just a little bit all over the place. We did like but I hope you kind of understood what we're trying to get at. All right. Firstly, power data is useful if you look at it and you analyze it. All right. And that so efficiency factor is used for tracking aerobic development and adaptation at different phases of training. Okay, so that's normalized power over your heart rate, right? How much power you're putting out for a given input, for given intensity, okay? Variability index is how even you rode the ride, okay? And as triathletes, we kind of want to keep it as low as possible, right? Low variability index, meaning we pace ourselves on the hills, and we don't attack and surge too much, all right? And we're able to pull back in, like in headwinds, we don't get carried away. We're able to just control our power for a low variability index. Intensity factor is used to arrive at your goal race power. So through the weeks of race-specific testing, then you would go in knowing what you're capable of in terms of intensity factor, and so that's what you would aim for on race day. Okay, so it gives you something to strive for, to motivate yourself to push on the day itself. Okay. Bottom line power is useful to track training adaptations through different phases, and also to build a realistic power plan for your key races. Okay. So that's the gist of it. Time for any questions or comments that you might have.
Shem, this is Greg. All the processes that you have, very manually pulling out all that stuff. I mean, I know variability index and everything else. Is there a way that Garmin doesn't spit it out and allow you to track this thing or export it so that you don't have to manually do this?
Training Peaks, I believe, they track intensity factor.
Yeah, they have all these numbers. They have EF, they have VI, they have IF as well.
That's in Training Peaks, is it?
Yeah, but they don't spit it out. It doesn't spit it out in what we call in a series, right? Like you can't say can't select all your Salita routes and then try to
like a table and get it all planned out like that, right? Yeah. No, I think you need to build your own files for that.
Okay.
Shem.
Yep. Oh.
Okay, so if you are building your a plan, let's say you're doing loops, say for example Newton loops, right? And so you're clocking loop 1, loop 2, and then you're calculating your intensity factor. And you kind of know that, okay, for that particular route, if I have I can then match my intensity factor to that relative perceived effort. Yeah. So that helps me intuitively pace myself. But suppose I were to do a different route. For example, now it's the Ironman and it's in Desaru, where the course is different. Then I can know it will be difficult for me to then match the RPE now onto a different route. And when I'm riding, I probably cannot calculate intensity factor and all that stuff, right, on the go. So how do I bridge that training knowledge with the actual race situation?
Yeah. So what you need to do then is you need to find the loop that roughly coincides with the Desaru rolling hills in Desaru, right? And then you would use a loop based on that. Okay. So maybe you would do your Clementi loop that comes down, and then you go up Old Holland Road, that lumpy loop that you use.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that would be a better loop if you're training for Desaru, which is like has ups and downs. Okay. Yeah. So that, again, that's the specificity of preparing for a specific race.
Right. So if we had been able to get to Desaru back in April, then it would have been ideal to then lap different parts of the section and then have an idea how hard to push, right? That would be the ideal.
Yeah. So, yeah, I would, yeah, we would have gone, again, created a workable route between, like, well, 8 to 15K, and then we would have just gone round and round and round that. I mean, if you really wanted to stick to training this way, right, and getting those figures in before the race, then that's the way I see it. That's the best way to do it. Loops of between, like between 10 to 15K, 20Ks is okay. So that the first section of the ride, the second section of the ride, and the last section of the ride, like week to week, you can experiment with holding back and pushing to get your pacing right, you see. And then you would have the data to look at it to back it up.
The one thing that would vary from day to day is the headwind. So it's something very hard to get a feel of, because then all your intensity metrics and all that goes out of the window, because the headwind just screws up all your perception and all that, right?
No, you see, the headwind will screw up your perception of speed, right? But power is power. So you just be going slower, but for the same power. So you know, and then again, then the lesson there would be to not get discouraged about seeing, like you're crawling along at 18 km an hour, but to know that, well, this is your goal race power, okay? And that if you were to push it, let's say your goal race pace was like 24 km an hour, right? If you were to push it, then later on, you would pay for it down the road, you see. So again, it gives you a balance and a check to say, I might be going slower than race pace, but I'm going at goal race power, and that's because there's a huge wind in my face and I can't really go very fast, and everyone has to deal with that on the day. So it's kind of a leveler, you see.
Okay.
Then also think about, well, if you're riding into a headwind, then on the way back, then you would have the tailwind on you as well. Okay. So that's always we try to give ourselves that hope that the wind doesn't change direction on you.
I have a question, Chen.
Yep, Greg.
Sometimes they have, I mean, this is sort of on Paul's sort of point about race specificity, and sometimes they have those courses that you can actually download the course, what you call course route.
Yep.
Yeah, onto your trainer, right? Is that relevant? And is that another way of working around that? And have you thought about, have you used it? And what is the relevance of that? Those course routes.
Yeah, so there are certain, I think there are apps, something like Best Bike Split, right? Where you can go, where you can actually download the course profile and load it on to the thing and ride it, and it will replicate the inclines on your trainer for you. I haven't used it myself, and now that you're bringing it up, like I think, yeah, like that would be, it would be useful to replicate, you know, the incline and gradients that you have to put out on the day. What I find though, that for race specific training, it's better done out on the roads, okay? Simply because on a trainer, it's, you know, like if you're doing we're talking about long rides here, right? If you're doing a long ride, like it's just, there's nothing like being out there in the elements and mentally like focusing on, you know, like your nutrition and like your road handling and balance on the bike and all that, right? Whereas
there's a lot going on, like today there's a lot going on.
Exactly, right? Like in the rain and all that, like there's nothing that can prepare you for being out in the elements like being out in the elements. You know, and I guess you could ride that course on the trainer to get a feel for what it's like, or you could repeat it week to week. But I will always say get out on the roads. But like before you go into race, you have to get out on the roads and do it.
It's not a substitute, like it's a good complement with what you're saying. You can try it to see where you are in your program.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess so. Yeah, yeah. And then, you know, my bottom of my heart, I'm actually thinking it might give you a false sense of right? Like you know, I've done this at this power, and
I can do it.
Almost too perfect, so I know exactly how this time is going to feel. But when you get there, right, and you're not in aircon with a fan blowing at you, then you are your stuff, and then you know, like your confidence might just, you know, yeah. So that's my issue with doing. Because a lot of people ask me, oh, can I train for my, can I do my long rides indoors? And I mean, I think that twice a week on the trainer is good enough. And Whereas if you're training to increase fitness, right, then I would say get on the trainer, because then you can really, like, I mean, you can have your eyes closed and you can be, you know, have your motivational music blaring, and then you can really go for it. And that's just to get fit, right? And you don't have to worry about like traffic lights, you know, potholes on the road. You can, that's a physical stimulus that you're after. Whereas race specificity has a lot more to do with handling the conditions, being out there in elements for 2.5, 3, you know, hours kind of thing, right?
Yeah. Got it. Yeah, good point.
Yeah. Good. Okay, any other questions?
I'm good.
Okay, you're good. Greg?
Thanks for doing this again, Shan. It's great.
Yeah, no problem. Unfortunately, I think I was a little bit more well prepared the first time around, because I was just, the slides were fresh in my head and all that, but it's okay. I think you guys kind of understood. If you have any other questions, you just ask me.
No, it's clear. It's clear.
Okay,
yeah.
Great.
Okay,
then thanks, guys.
Thanks,
and enjoy your weekend, rest of your weekend.
Thanks,
right?
Thanks for the ride.
Okay.
Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, I'm trying to turn it off. You can go, Greg. I'm figuring out how to turn this thing off. Here we go. Stop recording.